Hey, my friend, today is Thursday, October 2nd, 2025. It is, of course, the Bitfarms daily broadcast, or so we are naming these broadcasts, given that we are talking quite a bit about Bitfarms and to a lesser extent, Canaan. So Bitfarms is up 94, nearly 95% year to date. That is pretty remarkable. Just in the past month alone, Bitfarms is up 116%. Now you say to yourself, well, how does that math work out? Well, it's because remember, Bitfarms really collapsed pretty badly after the new year began. And so it's had to claw its way back, not just to break even, but now to being up 94, nearly 95% for the year. I suspect that we are going to see shares of Bitfarms continue to perform incredibly well through year end, particularly if we get what I expect will be some meaningful updates as it relates to the Panther Creek HPC AI data center, right? That's kind of the real rocket fuel for this company's share price. It really is. Now, speaking of Panther Creek, this evening, PP&L, which is a company that basically manages the transmission lines, right, to keep it simple, in the PP&L zone of the PJM grid, which is where Panther Creek happens to be located. They are going to have something of a open mic night where, hey, people can ask questions about proposed substations, proposed transmission lines. This is a bit of a contentious topic in northeastern Pennsylvania. I noticed that when I visited the Talon facility not that far from Panther Creek several months ago, where the Susquehanna nuclear power plant happens to be located. I noticed some signage, on different roads where people were really kind of upset about a proposed, I think it might have been something like a 300 or 315 kilovolt transmission line, right, that was being proposed in that area. Correct me if I'm a little bit off in terms of how many kilovolts that particular line happens to be, but it's a pretty substantial amount of electricity, and so people were concerned and continue to be concerned about property values being impacted negatively because of that, the routing of the cables, stuff like that. Hey, I'm sensitive to that, and I get how this can become a very contentious issue. So, it's always that balancing act, right? You want to have economic progress. You want to be able to energize, the future, right, for this region of Pennsylvania. But you got to do so in a way, right, that makes sense for people who live in the area. And I think, hey, look, setting aside the issue of whether or not a high voltage transmission line is going to run through your backyard or through your farm, I think one issue that could potentially help resolve this, it's not going to resolve it in every instance, but you say to yourself, boy, if a company can sort of kick up the amount of money that they're willing to pay for the land or for the area of land that they want to use for these transmission lines, that probably helps ease the way a little bit more so, right, than if it's perceived to be a bit of a lowball offer. And remember, we live in an era now where everybody has access to the internet, okay? It's one thing if the argument were, hey, we need these transmission lines because we need to power a small dairy farm up the road, right? That's one thing. And you can say, okay, well, I guess, hey, there's not a whole lot of money involved in dairy farming. So therefore, whatever, I understand, I can only be offered X amount of money. But, when people read, hey, look, there's a, multi-billion dollar facility, right, that's being proposed or that's being talked about, where everybody's going to potentially make just a tremendous amount of money. Hey, I don't want to necessarily be shortchanged, as it relates to a transmission line that has the potential to permanently impact my land, my farm, my community. So again, these are very complicated issues, right? You're never going to make everybody happy, right? For there to be progress in northeastern Pennsylvania, right? Hey, you need to sometimes have more, right, electricity. Hey, are there new technologies? Are there new ways of handling transmission lines that might make it so that, hey, you could use existing corridors? Hey, these are all issues that need to be ironed out. And I don't mean to get off on a tangent talking about this, but when we talk about the meeting that's going to happen tonight, understandably, there are going to be people with questions, and there are going to be people with concerns, and there are going to be people that are fearful and uncertain about what may transpire as it relates to what's being proposed. From my perspective, I think we got to let the process play out. I think, hey, my advice to all stakeholders would be to, hey, be reasonable with each other, right? I think reasonable accommodations can be made, right, to try to satisfy concerns that exist. I am not oblivious to what it's like to have, high power transmission lines near where one lives. In fact, many of the parks I visit on a routine basis have what appear to me to be very, very, very high voltage transmission lines. Who knows? Maybe the electromagnetic force field from those lines impacts the way that I think about markets or think about life. Who knows, right? My point is that I see it from both angles, and I'm sensitive to the need for there to be progress, but I'm also very, very deeply sensitive to the need for people who have lived for generations and farmed for generations in a particular community to have their landholder rights respected and to be honored with, I think, if it comes to it, payments that are representative of the economic value that's being created, right, by these transmission lines being created. So, hey, let's sort of see what happens. I'm expecting very good things to come, not just from this meeting this evening, but I suspect also just generally, right, with regard to the pace of progress that's taking place at Panther Creek. It really is a tremendous blessing, a tremendous boon for this community, right? It really, really is. And so I'm optimistic that we're going to see shares of Bitfarms, which lately over the past, say, 5 or so days, hey, things have been kind of taking a break since about roughly, let's call it, September 17th or so. Last couple of weeks, right? Things have been kind of, just finding their footing. But again, remember, we were up a lot, like a lot from early September. So, turning our attention to Canaan, because I did share, just really not to offend anybody or upset anybody. Hey, man, why is he not talking exclusively about Bitfarms? During the days of Stronghold Digital Mining, right, that's all I talked about, to the point where people would sometimes approach me and be like, bro, are you out of your mind? Why are you only talking about Stronghold? Well, hey, I believed very deeply in the mission and purpose of that business, and so that was my focus, right? Hey, I'm very passionate about seeing Bitfarms, right, with the strength of Stronghold Digital Mining and the assets that were acquired as a result of that combination between Stronghold and Bitfarms. Hey, I'm very, very passionate and bullish on Bitfarms doing well with those assets, right? And I think we're going to continue to see that happen. But hey, I wanted to just be transparent and say that, yeah, hey, look, the boatload of shares that I bought at about 95 cents a share, right, of Bitfarms, hey, look, I took that initial investment out, right, just to take some chips off the table. I still got whatever you could argue, plenty of interest in Bitfarms that remains. But hey, I made a strategic decision to reallocate that into shares of Canaan, which is a preeminent Bitcoin mining machine manufacturer. They are a Bitcoin miner themselves with, I think, about 10 exahash of Bitcoin mining capacity, right, within their system. And they're also, one could argue, a treasury company. They've got nearly 1,600 Bitcoin on their balance sheet. That's more than Bitfarms has. I mean, I think they're like the 35th largest Bitcoin hodler on planet Earth. I mean, in terms of, corporations and institutions that own Bitcoin. So that's pretty impressive. What is not so impressive is, the share performance of Canaan year to date. Now, I'm prefacing this by talking about the year-to-date performance prior to talking about what's been happening the past couple of days because, hey, you look at the stock of Canaan, it's just completely been on fire. Like tremendous, price surges. And it's easy to think, oh, you know what? Okay, so Canaan's a bit overvalued now. Really? Let's do a reality check. Year-to-date, Canaan, unless they've shot up like 100% in the last 20 minutes here, they're down like over 30% year to date, Canaan. And that's even after all of the moves higher that we've seen, the real massive re-rating of their stock that's begun to take place over the past several trading sessions. They're still down over 30% year to date. So when we look at what transpired today, for example, where in the pre-market, I noticed, wow, markets aren't even open yet. 5 million shares traded. Sure enough, there's a news release. What's happening? Well, Canaan announced the largest Bitcoin mining machine purchase in the last 3 years. This is for 50,000 Avalon A15 Pro mining machines. Okay, I did some math, and just on the low end of the potential revenue generated by this type of transaction, the absolute low end is like around $110 million. That assumes a lot of discounts. Could be a bit higher than that. Okay, $110 million from one transaction. I mean, that's more than what the company reported for Q2 2025 revenue for the whole quarter. This one transaction is more than that. That's kind of staggering. To deploy these 50,000 A15 Pro machines is going to require something like 185 megawatts of electricity. 185 megawatts. Okay, we're talking about roughly 11 exahash of Bitcoin mining capacity in one transaction. That is absolutely bonkers. That's amazing. Okay, so we are seeing not a stock, from my perspective, that's becoming overvalued. I mean, sure, hey, if we're up like 500% for the year, we could be saying, hey, you know what, it probably got a bit ahead of itself. Canan's a bit overvalued. Give me a break. I mean, it's still down over 30% year to date. So I believe, are in the process of seeing shares of Canaan get re-rated, much arguably in the same way that we saw shares of Bitfarms get re-rated. I don't know who really believed that Bitfarms was fairly valued at 70 cents a share, 90 cents a share. It just seemed ridiculous, right? It's as if those shares were being given away. Well, the story is much the same with Canaan, okay? So what we are seeing right now, from my perspective, is the share price playing catch up. It's not just me who thinks that these shares have more room to run. When you look, and you could check this out yourself, just look at what professional Wall Street analysts have as an average price target for shares of Canaan. I think it's something like $2.43 a share. Okay, last I looked, I think Canaan was at around roughly here, about $1.25. So, hey, I don't see shares of Canaan as being overvalued, just like I don't really see shares of Bitfarms as being overvalued, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? So, hey, this is not investment advice. I know that many of you you say, hey, wow, if Steven's doing this, I'm going to check this out. I'm going to maybe, do something similar. Congratulations. I'm genuinely happy for you. I just want to encourage you to, hey, use your own judgment. You decide what your risk tolerance is. Hey, do you want to take some chips off the table? There's no harm in doing that. Okay. I think we all have to make decisions based on what we feel we can tolerate in terms of risk, in terms of uncertainty, in terms of volatility, right? Bitfarms is a very volatile stock. Canaan is extremely volatile as well. So I'm holding on. I am not inclined to really do anything just yet with any of my shares of Canaan. And I think both companies, Bitfarms and Canaan, I think they, in many ways, actually don't even overlap that much when you look out into the future. Remember, Bitfarms is charting a path forward that's really dedicated to HPC AI. And that's amazing. That's awesome. Okay. Hey, I'm interested in Bitcoin, though, as well. And Canaan, by contrast, they've charted a future that really seems to be hyper-focused on, hey, the manufacture and sale of Bitcoin mining machines, building up their own Bitcoin mining infrastructure, again, approaching about 10 exahash or so, right? And having a HODL that's pretty darn impressive, almost 1,600 Bitcoin on their balance sheet. CEO, CFO, they were buying shares, almost 1 million shares bought by those two guys. I mean, that to me telegraphed something was coming. Sure enough, something is coming. We're starting to see it materialize. We don't really know yet what is left of the $30 million share repurchase that they, the company itself had out there. I think we're going to find out more about that in the weeks ahead. So look at things are looking really good. The price of Bitcoin is looking really good. I think the prospects for HPC AI are looking really good. So from my perspective, things overall are looking really good. even though, yes, the US federal government is still shut down and may remain shut down for, who knows how much longer. Okay, my friend, with all of that said, let's stay positive. Let's be great, and we'll speak to each other again very, very soon.